the upshot of all this is that I think that Bitcoin Cash is going to be the global reserve currency one day, right? Bitcoin has always grown exponentially from its beginnings way back when, and I don't see any reason that it's going to stop. Pretty much it just defies the haters every single time.
You're going to love this. Trust me. What you're seeing now is my normal state. This is a Super Saiyan. And this is what is known as a Super Saiyan that has ascended past a Super Saiyan. Or you could just call this a Super Saiyan 2.
There will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, Banks.
Increasing the block size to 32 megabytes right now. What would be the top 5 arguments that would get hurled against me?
No, that's a good one.
There are a few that the big blockers got right.
Ching, like all these coins splash into the wallets of all the winners. I love that.
There's a new threat out there. It's crypto.
Well, we're live.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency, this is episode number 124, properties of Bitcoin and BTC in El Salvador. I messed up the slide just before we went live. But anyway, featuring NoPara. Today is Saturday, the 17th of August, and our guest today, I have to give huge props right off the bat because we called him out in our episode about the BTC hoax along with a bunch of other people, and explained all what was going on there, and he was the only one who took the time to look into what we'd said, process it, write back, have some discussion, and not just dismiss it or ignore it or anything like that. And that honestly truly is the mark of a great mind and somebody who is very humble and willing to learn. So I have to express, right from the start, my great appreciation. I've been really looking forward to this episode. But our guest is NoPara, a BTC C# developer and a rejuvenator, which he can maybe give us some more details about what that is. I don't want to explain it because I think I might explain it wrong. Welcome to the show, NoPara. How'd you get into Bitcoin?
Hey, oh, that's a big question, isn't it? Thank you for that introduction. Let me tell a couple of things about myself. So I started in Bitcoin in 2013, and from that time on, not from that time on, in 2015, I started working on privacy, Bitcoin privacy, and Wasabi wallet. So I assume many of you have heard about Wasabi wallet. It has just recently, so the company behind Wasabi wallet has shut down. Wasabi wallet is still an open source software like Bitcoin Core or Electrum, but the company has shut down, and that's due to some regulatory pressure. Let's just leave it at that. And since then, I started working on rejuvenation, how to turn back the aging clock, how to age backwards. So, but that doesn't mean I completely left Bitcoin, of course. So I still have a series called Fitcoiners, where I interview people who are into Bitcoin and fitness, health and fitness. So that might be something interesting. Well, what do we talk about today?
Yes, well, Bitcoin's a long-running project, right? I think it's a very interesting fusion of interests because people are always talking about, like, what about when the block reward runs out in like 2140, and people are saying, oh, we're not going to be here, or that's somebody else's problem. And then sometimes people are talking about, well, we need Bitcoin to last for thousands of years to have this standardized monetary system and whatever, right? So if we don't live long enough, we're not going to see how it all plays out, right? So I like that you have an interest in sticking around long enough to kind of see how it goes. Can you give me a bit more detail about the Wasabi thing? Because I know Wasabi, I've not actually used it, and I know it has a focus on privacy because there was a lot of beef then with Samurai, right? About who was kind of the best privacy wallet, and I don't know, various other things that might have gone on there. For my listeners who I assume are also probably familiar with it at about that level of detail, can you help explain the context there?
Sure. So most importantly, the best privacy wallet was and is Wasabi wallet. Okay, so there is that's a lot of things, right? So where are we now? Right now there is Wasabi wallet, there is no Samurai wallet, and the Samurai developers are in jail. So there is also Joy Market. That's the current situation. How did we get here? What is it even? So firstly, we had in Bitcoin things called centralized mixers. Bitcoin Fog, chip mixer, whatnot, centralized mixers, which had two problems. They could steal your money and they could de-anonymize you. Now, what Wasabi Wallet did is that it cannot steal your money and cannot de-anonymize you. There was also blockchain info's shared coin, which was also similar CoinJoin implementation, but it could de-anonymize you even if it couldn't steal your money. That was a big step forward. So Samurai Wallet basically copied Wasabi Wallet's properties, right? And then Wasabi, later on with Wasabi, we came up with Wasabi Wallet 2.2, which was Wasabi Wallet 1.0 on steroids. It was much cheaper and much faster to gain privacy. So since this is a Bitcoin Cash podcast, I should actually note that there was I think there still is cash shuffle, something based on cash fusion, shuffle, and it's called Cash Fusion, and that was a precursor for Wasabi Wallet 2.0. So I don't want it to be a too long of introduction, but there is a connection between Bitcoin Cash and Wasabi Wallet that the people who figured out what we need to do are actually, surprisingly to me, came from the Bitcoin Cash side and not from the Bitcoin side. And then what brings us to today, regulatory crackdown in the couple of few years, it started to escalate to more and more dangerous levels. The Samurai developers are in jail, and the company that was developing Wasabi Wallet has shut down, and now it's in the hands of the open source community like Electrum or Bitcoin Core is. So
is there any plan then at this stage? I understand if your position is, okay, we've given it to the open source community, kind of you do with it what you want, or is there anybody who was on the team working on it that is still going to be maintaining it going forward, or what's the status there at the moment?
So So there are people who are still working on it, who were working on it. In December, I left actually the project in December. Around 3 months ago, the Samurai people got in jail. Around 2 months ago, the ZK Snacks is the name of the company behind Wasabi Wallet. And this company that I built was like 50 people, right? So it was pretty big, all things considered. And around 2 months ago, the remaining management of ZK Snacks said that it's enough for them as well. So there are a couple of things happened here. For one, there were like 4 or 5 or 6 developers who said that, hey, unlike Samurai Wallet, we have never been trying to ask for criminals publicly to come to us and use us. So that should matter. So what they said is they created a wallet called Ginger Wallet from Wasabi, and they running in the exact same way how we were running with Wasabi Wallet, because well, they are opening, Schrödinger's cat. Is the cat dead or alive? Yes. Well, they decided to open it. They were actually, they are developers, so they don't get business that much. And I think they made a huge mistake by not taking over all the users, because now they are starting from zero. So it might not work out. Anyway, so a part of the team is continuing with Ginger Wallet. Around 2 or 3 or 4 people are still continuing developing with Wasabi, right? ZK Snacks allocated money for them for some time, and then who knows? So they are still developing Wasabi as an open source project. And there are a couple of people who are running Wasabi Wallet coordinators. Obviously, there are ones who are anonymous, and I don't know them because they are anonymous. But there are also ones who are betting on that, hey, if they are not making money from CoinJoin coordination, then it should be fine legally. So the project has dispersed into many different parts, and which one is going to work? That's an open question.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I think that's going to be really interesting. I guess we'll wait and see how it goes down. There's always so much happening in crypto, even in Bitcoin, that I can't follow it all. And I was only very tangentially aware of some of those elements, but if I had to put some money on it, I think the ones who already had the existing network effect of the users, that's so powerful. You're fighting so hard uphill. You've got to have a massive edge or a differentiator to pull that back over time. So that's probably what I would expect to be the deciding feature. But if there's regulatory involvement and so forth, it gets murky very, very quickly. So I wanted to ask then, given that you said you've been involved since 2013, same as me, what was your kind of take on or view of with the whole block size war period? And then after that, as far as I know, you were sort of more on the BTC side, but did you follow BCH? Have you had any interest in that? Was it only recently that you maybe had a look at it after we pinged you about it? What was your take on that element?
So, yes, I was on the BTC side, but it's like, the side that is not forking, that's the most likely to be the one who is taking most of the value, because it's any software developer knows users don't upgrade ever, So it was not a hard choice. I didn't see there to be a choice. Something what bothered me the most, I think this was my largest pain, is that this has turned out to be, well, this is how, if Bitcoin will be upgraded, then this is the way, this is how it will be upgraded. There is no other way to upgrade Bitcoin. But the problem is, if we are going into two chains and both of the chains are valuable, then every single person who is choosing which chain they are going to stay on is going to consolidate every UTXO of theirs on the other chain and send it to an exchange and back to their wallet, right? Because those UTXOs are multiplied by the fork. And if you're consolidating all your UTXOs, then you're just exposed your entire Bitcoin wallet to the entire world. And this was, it's not blaming, there is no one to blame on here, but this realization was like, holy fuck, this event is like de-anonymizing the entire Bitcoin blockchain right at this moment. So, yeah.
Wow, that's a really interesting take. It makes sense, you're correct. But it would only be a sort of privacy-focused developer that would see it in that way. There was some swapping services. Obviously, people didn't all just 100% dump one side or dump the other side, and it would have happened over time, and it spread out across different exchanges. And then obviously people trade peer-to-peer as well too. Like, people might have known other people in the Bitcoin community and done a P2P swap as well. So it's not a complete calamity, but it's a fair point, actually, that in a certain way, I also think that maybe lends to some of the conspiracy theory angle, that if you are able to divide the community enough to create a chain split, that's an excellent opportunity for people who were trying to surveil Bitcoin to have more insight into it. But that's a fascinating observation. I've literally never heard anybody say that. That's really interesting. And your heuristic was correct about the users not updating. I made completely the wrong choice. Well, ideologically maybe the right choice, but in terms of market value or in terms of prominence, I made the wrong choice. And I swapped all my BTC to BCH because I thought the opposite. I thought, no, everybody who's in the community is really passionate and really cares about this P2P cash vision, and they'll see that this is the superior way forward, which, according to me, obviously not according to everybody, but I thought everybody would think that same way, and they didn't, right? So it's very interesting to hear how people decided to play that. Did you sell off your BCH immediately, or did you hold on to some of it as well too?
Oh, the privacy problem was clear to me right at the beginning, so I was just keep holding it, and whenever an opportunity arrived that, hey, Nicola Doré actually wrote a software that sends your money to Shapeshift, and I think I just added Tor to it and did it over a couple of days, and that's when I started selling my BCH, but it was so cumbersome that I just, what, fuck that.
Yeah, fair enough. Everybody's always, hyping on about, free airdrop and stuff like that. But for anybody who's actually been involved in it, it's actually a ginormous hassle.
You have to work for it. You have to work for your money.
You really do. And then you're trying to dig up like what any dust here or there. And then as soon as the split has already happened and you maybe sent coins on one side, but not on the other side, and it just turns into a complete palaver. So much aside from anything else, I'm not championing forks and splits and airdrops for that exact reason. Did the rising fees, which were coming in as a result of the blockchain getting full and all that, did you notice that making a difference were you developing Wasabi at that time? Or what did you make of, because wallet developers are the first ones impacted when they get users ringing up on their support line saying, what's going on? My transactions aren't working, or it's too expensive, or anything. How did that play into your experience?
So that's a good question, because I was always mindful of the rising fees. In fact, the surprise to me is that we don't have $1,000 fees just yet. Like the block space is scarce. Like there is no way around. Fees are going to rise. So the question is, how are we going to handle that? And for Wasabi Wallet, at first I didn't have an answer, because the answer is that, well, we obviously have to try to make it as cheap as possible, use as little block space as we can, and eventually we ended up at the pace where we don't have an order of magnitude improvement anymore. Like no matter what we are doing with Wasabi 2.2, we are just never going to achieve an order of magnitude improvement on how we are utilizing the block space, and therefore it's time to calculate what's going to happen. So what's going to happen? The calculation is that people with low amount of Bitcoins, they are going to not be able to use Wasabi Wallet. So it's only going to be useful for people or entities who have more than hundreds of Bitcoins, right? Because otherwise the transaction fees will make a coin join very expensive. So just to give you some numbers here, let's say a Bitcoin transaction is $1, then a coin join workflow. So I receive money and I coin join and I send that money, right? This is the equivalent to a single Bitcoin transaction. That would be around $10, right? A 10x increase. So, but this increase is relative to block space, not to amount of how much money someone has. No, it's relative to block space. So therefore, people who have a lot of Bitcoins will always be able to coin join. It will always be worth to them because their fees are not going to be that high. So that was the realization. And I don't want to go into the Lightning Network, but later we will.
Okay, yeah. We'll talk about that later. So you're talking about that 10x. That's for one round of coin join, or for multiple rounds?
Multiple rounds. It's to achieve your desired anonymity set, right? It could be one round, or it could be 5 rounds. It depends on how the stars align at that time.
Yes. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Okay, all right, really interesting. And I also wanted to ask you, what did you make of the hoax episode that we did? Obviously, we tagged you in that, and a lot of other people. I know it was maybe a little bit aggressive in terms of, coming out of the gate, firing with that, being like people are lying either to themselves or to other people. Just from your point of view, being the only one who was willing to actually write back and engage in the discussion, what did you make of that episode?
So it was a long time ago. I don't remember too much, but I recall my impression of someone who was talking. I don't even remember who, but he was the guest. And my impression was that, this guy really gets it, but at the end of his thinking always takes the wrong turn. So that was what I was thinking there.
Okay, interesting. All right, let's check in on the price, which we do on every episode. It's been a big dip off since we did the last episode, at least for BCH. $346.03 to buy 100 megasats of BCH, which is way down. One BTC sat will buy 171.4 BCH sats, so we're down on the ratio there. BTC today is about $59,324. and 1 Ethereum will buy 752 BCH megasats. So we're flat there. So actually BCH dominance has been rising. BTC has, not BCH dominance, BTC dominance has been rising. It's been doing well recently against ETH and BCH, but maybe not fantastically against the US dollar. What do you make of the market action? Are you a big trader? Do you ignore that? Do you hodl? How do you deal with the perpetually changing crypto markets?
I make one trade a year, so I don't really look at them.
Yeah, fair enough. Over time, I think we've had increasingly people just say, yeah, I'm just tuned out of it. But it is always interesting because, yeah, some people have very elaborate setups. You know, some people are trying to do tax harvesting and different things. Some people are doing a lot of DeFi. Some people are doing nothing. Some people just put it in cold storage and forget about it. So I like to ask everyone. Okay, let's get on to this Bitcoin properties. So after we did that episode and we were chatting on Twitter afterwards, and we talked about doing this show, and you said it would be really good to talk about these properties of money, and you have a graphic here which I'll try and describe a little bit for the listeners. You've got this absolutely shredded guy, Ziz character with an anonymous mask on, V for Vendetta style mask. He's got Bitcoin Arena with the Bitcoin B. And then you've got these 3 functions of money here: unit of account, which says stability; store of value, which says scarcity and security; and medium of exchange, which says divisibility, programmability, cognizability, acceptability, portability, and fungibility. And then those elements kind of combine into this mathematical formula of number go up equals a function of all those different properties. And then you kind of have the rising, looks like a rising price line of best fit kind of price action in the background. I thought it was really, really interesting, and it matches similar to what my listeners will know from episode 85 that I explain about the properties of money and the whole point of Bitcoin. But walk me through it, this graphic. How did you come to make this, and what does it all mean?
Well, it was really interesting to see you actually get it 100% right away, because I wasn't sure people do. But so I like to start with the blockchain arena there. That the blockchain arena includes the cryptocurrency arena, and that includes the Bitcoin arena. And I'd like to make a point why I'm not focusing on the blockchain arena, and that has to do with money as a fundamental technology. So if you are put to the task of think about something more important or fundamental than money, then it's going to be really hard to come up with anything. The only thing I could come up with is actually longevity. And that's why I'm there. But anyway, it's almost impossible. So the consequence of this money being so important to fix is that any blockchain application that may or may not work, right? Like decentralized voting, huge revolution, decentralized identity, this blockchain, that blockchain, NFTs, anything that you can come up with is nothing compared to the application of money.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, because I always think of it as well too. People get very excited about DeFi or whatever they're hyped about on any given week. But the reason I think the monetary part is so critical is because that's what sustains the whole thing. Like, you can't have a big NFT project or whatever you're excited about, people get, or like, we're going to do these identity, different things. At the end of the day, if the blockchain units themselves are not being traded as money, then they will just leach value to the ones that are being traded as a kind of currency. And then once you have that happen, then it drops your security, and then eventually the project gets abandoned, right? So if you want to, it's okay to be excited about all these other uses for cryptocurrency, but you need to like start with the foundations of it being money, and then you can add in extra stuff. But I think some people get excited about this extra stuff and they don't realize if it doesn't have the monetary backing, it's not going to last, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there is an interesting point I always like to make, that why don't we have completely anonymous marketplace on the internet right now? Well, because we need anonymous money and anonymous communication, and they must be really good. Anyway, let's move on to so now you wanna stay in money. As a person, you can decide on two things. Either you choose something to focus on, or you try to work on everything else. Okay, so you might decide to work on everything all at once. Let's say you create an exchange, right? That's a nice way. But many of us decides to actually work on one. Okay, now the question is, which is that one? And I just want to make an argument for one. So there are two principles here. One is the Pareto principle, and the other is some kind of networking rule. Let's start with the Pareto principle. The Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, is that one big is always going to be the top 20% is always going to trump the bottom 80%. Like, this is kind of how things tend to turn out. So some people might think that there's going to be many multiple currencies in the world, and that's right. There is going to be many multiple currencies, but there will be always a couple or eventually one that will matter. So there might be a lot of currencies, but the relevancy would concentrate into the hands of one, probably. Okay, so now my argument for Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a certain kind of adoption metric, and we know that something, a new thing, does not take over an old thing. When we are talking about networking scenarios, like money is a networking scenario, unless the new thing puts orders of magnitudes improvement on top of the old thing. So what I don't see is other altcoins to have orders of magnitude improvements on top of the old thing. And that's why my choice is to focus on Bitcoin, but I don't like to be religious about it. It's a practical choice. Now, what do you see? What do you think of this thinking? What do you guys think, both of you?
Well, I got to say, my thinking to you is actually very similar, and listeners to this show will know I'm always preaching like maximalism. I think is logical for that exact same reason you said. It's not that you have to be dismissing everything else as terrible or anything like that. It's just the fact that the benefit of Bitcoin, or any cryptocurrency really, any kind of money, but Bitcoin specifically, comes from having a large and growing network effect, which then just allows you to basically swamp all of the competition. So you have to have kind of a big tent mentality where you want a lot of focused people all building one thing, because like you said, people building exchanges or whatever, they're kind of not really relevant, because the competition between BTC and BCH or Litecoin or Monero comes down to the people who are obsessed with those coins, and then the exchanges just support them all basically, right? So it makes complete sense that the difference makers is whoever is following this logic that you have to be the one coin, and you essentially want to take over as much of the world as possible, right? So people sometimes say, okay, well, the market has already decided BTC is the biggest. But in my view, the end game is that you have all of humanity, 8 billion people, using crypto for every single transaction, pretty much. Maybe some people use gold, or some people are fiat fans. It'll be like the Gold Bugs Club, it'll be like the fiat historians club. So there'll be a few people, but basically almost everyone is going to be using crypto all the time. So in that sense, we're at less than 0.1% of the world so far that is using Bitcoin every single day as their money, right? So I completely agree pretty much with the first half of what you said. I'm just trying to remember, what was the second half you started talking there about?
Network. You have to have an order of magnitude improvement on top of the white thing.
Exactly. You've got to have an order of magnitude improvement to win. And BCH does not definitely have that over BTC, which is why for most of the history, the BCH price has declined against BTC, whether it was because of the brand or the censorship or the liquidity or the hash rate. These are all things that BTC has orders of magnitude improvement over BCH. Now, it's self-reinforcing, right? So BCH has to be able to win against all those orders of magnitude, and then in doing so, it will attract back hash rate, it will attract back price, it will attract back liquidity on exchanges, and then like a flippening would be very fast if it had some critical advantages that were so big that it could overcome those previous advantages by 10 to 100x, let's say, right? Let's say 100x. So where is BCH going to find those edges? The first and most obvious one is just simple network efficiency, right? BCH already has a far more than 100x advantage on transaction fees. Like a typical BCH transaction would be 1/10 or 1/100th of a cent maybe, and for BTC it's anywhere from $1 to $50. So you've already got several orders of magnitude there, but that's clearly not enough because so far it hasn't made any ground, right? So it needs much more than that, which is that it also needs things like DeFi. If it can be 10 to 100 times more powerful on a actual protocol level in terms of the network scripting. So that's why it's so important that the BTC side has essentially stalled or made things worse, in my opinion, with things like SegWit and Taproot, while the BCH community have improved their scripting and opcodes and whatever, because that's another way that we can get. Even being twice as good is not enough, though. It needs to literally be orders of magnitude better. And then I think as time goes on, another area that BCH has a huge advantage is in the resilience of the community. The BTC community are very hardcore, and that's impressive, and it's why they can stay at number one on the leaderboard for so long against, like, say, ETH. People are not as fanatical, so they lose over time. But the BCH community is even more fanatical than the BTC community, which is why they've survived 3 whole civil wars instead of just 1. And so as time goes on, we can see that it's very slow, but it is happening, and it's escalating, that the BCH community is just driving further and further ahead because the BCH people won't quit ever. And so if you have a group of people that won't quit, even if it's smaller to begin with, they just keep making progress, and slowly the other ones change their mind. So I think those are some examples, but so far it's been enough, like over the last couple of years, that BCH has arrested the slide against BTC. Over the last 2 or 3 years, BCH has stopped sliding against BTC, but it doesn't have a critical edge to start rising yet. But if it can find that edge, which is what I think is happening as the size of this show grows, for instance, as the community builds more and more DeFi with cash tokens, as we continue shipping upgrades like the ABLA upgrade, got a lot of, everybody was like, well, it's really cool. And I've heard a lot of people have been convinced about that. VM limits, UTXO commitments to fix initial block download, like these are already things that the BCH community is lining up. And then it's starting to produce apps like Cauldron, Dex, 15 of gaming, things that are not possible at all on BTC. And so if we can have 10 or 100x as good wallets and apps, which so far we haven't because we've been so far behind on resources and liquidity and network effect, but so it's taken a lot of time. But now that those things are starting to emerge on BCH, I imagine that's where we can maybe find those edges to start a flippening. That's probably my take. Jet, what's your thoughts?
I would agree with like everything that you just said, but there's one more thing that I want to add to this that I think is like the key differentiator. And that's, I think it is necessary to have a trustless, censorship-resistant layer one. I need people to be able to say, fuck you, this is my money, and I'm going to do what I want with it. And if people get economically censored and the L2s are centralized, well, that kind of ruins the whole point.
NoPara, thoughts?
You see, I think what comes next is going to, I hope it's going to put many of the things that you guys just said in their categorical place if the model that I'm developing since forever is correct. But what do you mean 3 civil wars? What was the third one?
Well, the eCash one, BCH has had 3 chain splits. BTC and BCH split in 2017.
Yes.
And then in 2018, November, BCH and BSV split again. And then in November of 2020, XCC and BCH split as well. Amori, he forked off. He has eCash, which is currently like 89th or something like that in the coin market cap, and a few other people, some of whom were very passionate BCH supporters, have been there all the time. So another band of them all kind of left, and then the BCH community has then been like stable, I'll say, since then. We then had another disaster in 2022 with Smart BCH, but that didn't cause a chain split. There wasn't enough, for a variety of reasons. But so essentially, in my mind, BCH is a very strange project because on one hand, it's been around since 2009, and there are literally people in the community that have been, involved in it that entire time. But on the other hand, the sort of modern, in quotation, version of BCH is only about 3 to 4 years old, and the change in the community has been massive in that time in terms of being, victim mentality, whining, creating splits, chaos amongst themselves, unable to get in any kind of sense of direction, and were very rightly sort of dismissed and mocked and derided by the rest of cryptocurrency, specifically the BTC community, but in general. People were right to write BCH off. It didn't look like a winning project, but things have turned around a lot on the elements that were struggling, and so for the elements that needed help, they've got a lot of improvement, and the ones that were still actually quite strong, like the resiliency, like sticking to the original cash mission, like not being able to be pushed off the branding, which is a huge signal for resilience, like having good protocol development. Even those years 2017 to 2020, the BCH actually shipped some really good protocol improvements, like we've been seeing with BTC, people talking about OpCat and stuff. It's all stuff that BCH already did years and years and years ago. So I think that's the third one is XCC. If you didn't know about that.
Which chain the Cash Fusion guys stayed on?
Good question. I don't know. I think, as far as I know, Mark Lundeberg is one of the Cash Fusion guys. I think, that's the real problem with the split, is then sometimes people leave and they pick neither because they're just sick of all the fighting and all that. So as far as I know, anybody, I would guess a combination of BCH and just left completely. I don't know of anybody involved in Cash Fusion that went on the eCash side, but it might have happened.
Okay. Anyhow, so let's go to the NGU formula. Number go up formula. So number go up. There is a theory of money that is as stable as the ground under you, right? Like the 3 functions of money: unit of account, store of value, medium of exchange. I have a problem with that. That's not super useful. we all know that it's true, but it's not super useful. But there are properties of good money theories, and these properties of good money theories, unfortunately, there are many of them, right? So I reviewed them and removed them stupid things like inherent value of money.
Yes.
So, holy shit. So I went so deep into this because I really didn't understand what the heck is this inherent value of anything. So I at one point, I was researching and wrote some articles on that, and at one point, I flew to Singapore to have a 10-episode-long interview with the world's foremost value scientist who wrote the book In Pursuit of Value, right?
Wow, amazing.
That's how I got bogged down on this
Yeah.
stupid little question that inherent value of money. Okay. So, okay. So I came to a model that's let's start with the unit of account. Everyone knows that if you want to pay with it, would be good to to measure that thing somehow. And if your money is volatile like crazy, then it's not going to be a very good unit of account. It's not going to be stable, right? So in the unit of account dimension, the property of good money is stability. But we don't have to worry about this. We don't have to worry about this at all, because as Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or any currency, as they are gaining value, as numbers go up, the harder it is for the boats to be moved by the waves, right? A small boat can move by the waves around, but a huge boat can only be moved down by an iceberg, or something big has to happen. So I'm not worried about the unit of account and the stability. It's gonna take care of itself. We can just put this aside. Next, still, I think there won't be any contention here is store of value. So I don't even want to over-explain it, but there are two properties here that I found. One is scarcity. Everyone knows what scarcity is. It's about no one should be able to print more money, basically. And this is the big innovation that Bitcoin brought compared to the traditional financial system. Now, there is a money that no one can print more. Mind blow. Like,
Yes.
how the fuck can even people, like, how the fuck could even society work in a way that people in rooms are printing more money? Like, okay. But look, the scarcity, the innovation of Bitcoin on this single property of scarcity has created the orders of magnitude. Thing that we are waiting for.
Yes.
It's still up for question, right? Bitcoin is still not the largest currency of the world, but
yes, you're right. That
just
the creation of scarcity, that alone was already enough that, even with 2 Bitcoin adopters, the network just started growing like crazy, because that was so much better than any fiat currency, even just on that property. I agree with you about that.
Okay, so the next one is security. This is my invention, actually. So it encompasses 2 things: how you are storing money and how then secure the network is itself. How secure the network is itself is something that the BCH versus Bitcoin debate is about. How you are storing your money is actually like, okay, are you using a cold storage, right? The ultimate store of money, or a hot storage, right? Well, it's not that bad, but it's still non-custodial, because then you can go on storing as a custodial, right? So if your only option is to store this money in a custodial way, like if you have, let's say, $1 billion in cash, $1 billion in dollars, then you're not going to store it in cash. Like, that's just not an option. But if you have $1 billion in Bitcoins, then why not? Non-custodial storage, fine. So
Exactly.
So I had to invent this security property because I had to account for different wallet designs. Actually, hardware wallets, right? That's another thing. Different wallet designs and different protocol, parameters that developers like to argue about a lot. So I don't know if you wanna say anything about. I guess BCH and Bitcoin are the exact same in terms of how people are storing their money, right? It could be non-custodial or custodial.
I don't know. Like, so for me, I would say, yeah, that's a good way of breaking it down. Is so on the hash rate front, BTC is winning, by far, like in terms of the security, and I'm completely on board with that. And that was one of the things that I really tried to spread into the BCH community when the show was new. Was so many people still had so much copium about, oh no, we've got the lower hash, it doesn't matter, or the miners are irrational, or like whatever excuses they come up with. That's all nonsense, all right? BTC has much bigger hash rate, and that's much better, definitely. But the thing is, even with that massively increased hash rate, in practice, the difference almost all of the time is not that great. Am I worried about the miners rewriting my transactions on BCH? It's literally never happened. It's never happened to anybody that I'm aware of. So in theory, it's a huge problem. And in this monetary evaluation, it is also a big problem, no doubt about that. But in practice, it hasn't stopped BCH competing, which is the main area. Like, I would be really worried if the miners were constantly trying to screw with BCH, and that would massively reduce its competitiveness. But in reality, they don't. So that's kind of fine. And as far as it's not fine, but it's tolerable. Let's put it that way. And then when you said the, cold storage, hot storage, custodians, well, this is an area that we're already seeing that BCH is not going to get an advantage immediately, but it's kind of going to, because currently BCH traffic is lower than BTC. There's more BTC holders, and they use it more frequently than BCH. That's undeniable. But if they were equivalent, so again, a lot of this comes back to if BCH could start getting an advantage, everyone would be able to store on the base layer. The BTC adoption rate has slowed down as a result of running into all the inefficiencies and rugs and problems that come about as custodians. And that's a problem on two layers. Not only is it that more and more people are getting into custodians, more and more people are using them and having problems, and it's inefficient, they're essentially fighting against the network effect, because the network effect of the protocol stops to a certain extent, not for liquidity or trading, but it stops when people are using custodians because they're not directly interacting with the chain. But the secondary problem is actually it's a second degree problem. It's in the minds of the community. Not only have you lost some people that are not adding to that usage of the security, but you also have less people educating others about how to use that security, and that turns into a vicious cycle, which is why now you can see a lot of BTC in quotation mark, Bitcoiners say it's completely okay to use custodians, and who, will come up with solutions in the future, or maybe we don't even need to. It's a bank-to-bank settlement system. Look at what Hal Finney said. In 2013, 2015, nobody said that. Nobody said that. The argument was, are we going to do big block scaling or are we going to do small block scaling, but we'll find solutions and workarounds. If somebody had said at that time, okay, we're going to just all use custodians and it's going to be a bank-to-bank settlement layer, they would have been laughed out of the room immediately. Everybody would say that's completely false. That's definitely not the way we're going to go. But now, over many years, it has been normalized because you have this brain drain effect where you had the Bitcoin community going in this certain direction, and then there was a split, and then each culture started to diverge. And the BTC culture, which was predictably, according to the BCH side, became the side that increasingly sort of had these copes and excuses for custodians because their technical underpinnings weren't able to continue growing the network effect. So BTC has a far larger network effect now, but the problem is it's not growing because there's essentially this much capacity and this much traffic. So whenever there's a spike, like you said, as demand goes up, fees go up, but it never goes above 50, or even we've seen it up to about $120, but it doesn't stay there very long because demand doesn't keep growing in the face of restricted supply. Instead, people move to alternatives. So there's this like secular pattern of like BTC gets popular, new people come in, the fees rise, people decide that is not economically feasible, and they move to alternatives and the demand drops, and then that cycle just repeats, and eventually you have enough people that get burned in BTC that they have all moved to alternatives, which is why now there's so much interest in all the altcoins. The real question is, at what point do people start who've been through that cycle start converging on an alternative solution that can compete with BTC directly? And that's kind of my theory, is that over time eventually people will realize that they need to converge on BCH. To a large extent, people have already kind of converged on not BTC because the amount of developers, the amount of conferences, the amount of discussion, everything that goes on in all of crypto is bigger than BTC. BTC is ahead on market cap, but on basically no other metric can it compete against the rest of combined crypto. But the combined crypto is all diversified, it's all fragmented, right? So eventually that needs to hone in on a single solution that can work at scale. Everything that starts getting to scale, whether it's Ethereum or Solana or whatever, it starts breaking down. But BCH is not going to have those problems, or at least that's my contention. So when it comes to security, I would say BTC has a huge edge on the hash rate, and BCH has a potential, it's currently not used, but it will have an edge once it gets to an equivalent amount of daily users, because everyone will be able to have that cold storage on chain, and there won't be this disruption with a culture of custodians.
I don't know how important network security is because I'd never done the analysis. I'm pretty sure some people would be able to do the analysis, but the thing about security is that it doesn't matter until it does, right? Like yes. it works until it doesn't, and so there is that. But something interesting you said there on the other part of security, which is the personal security, is that So you made an argument that since the block size of BCH is larger, therefore non-custodial usage won't be pushed out of using it, right?
Yes.
Okay,
less.
so
Obviously, people will still have, some people will still choose to use custodians, but the option will be there for everyone to use it non-custodially.
Okay. I throw you the lightning card.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's not do it yet. That's interesting. Let's keep it that way. Let's move on to the most contentious, most problematic part, which is the medium of exchange.
Yeah.
That if we could fix the medium of exchange of any cryptocurrency, right, then then that would be the future. It's like there is no way people wouldn't start to use money which is uninflatable, anonymous, fast, and free to use, right? Like,
yes,
it's just anyway. Okay, so divisibility, yeah, whatever, 8 Satoshi decimal places. Okay.
But again, BCH has an advantage here, right? This is the thing. Like, BCH has a lot of
Fair.
subtle advantages on divisibility, because divisibility of BTC is capped by the minimum fees. As the fees go up, you can't divide it into smaller amounts. That doesn't help, because you're essentially just creating dust outputs. You're burning your own coins, and there's already been a lot of good analysis done. I think Emergent Reason sometimes has these stats. I can't remember them exactly, but it's something like when the fees went up to $20, it was like 80 or 90% of UTXOs on BTC were underwater. Like, not the value, because there was some big UTXOs, like Pareto principle, right? But the actual, if you counted up how many UTXOs are, tons of them just get burnt as fees rise. So that makes the divisibility, it's like divisibility going in reverse. Even in technically, you could chop up the Satoshi smaller and smaller. In practice, rising fees destroys your divisibility.
Well, and then this also comes down to the belief in Lightning, right? If you believe that Lightning will work, then okay. Still, we have a long way to go to portability, which is the main Lightning thingy.
Yes.
Programmability. Now, this is also my invention. It's my invention is programmability, because I wanted to account for the scripting language of Bitcoin and the phenomenon of Ethereum. Like, if programmability is not a differentiator of good money, then Ethereum should not exist, right? So something is needed there, and it's a new property, programmability. I don't even know what to take of it, but it shows that, hey, there is something here that might be more important than we would think.
Yeah, and I think what I found really interesting was when I saw this was that you're not the only one who's done this. I remember Mark Falzon did a video a while ago where he also did a similar thing. He looked into all the properties of money, blah, 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 and he made a list that he thought, and he had DeFi as one of his criteria on that list for the exact same reason. And I think there's a reasonable case that the invention of cryptocurrency has created a new property of money, because nobody would have said that before with fiat currency or with gold or with seashells or anything else. It is brand new as a property of money, and I agree with that. And obviously I would say, like I said before, that BCH probably already has a non-trivial advantage in terms of we have re-enabled opcodes, we've got CTOR, we've got the cash tokens is a huge giant leap, but maybe that's not enough. But give it another 2 or 3 upgrades and BCH is going to have an exponential 10x or more advantage in this area. Although of course BTC could always start catching up if they started shipping good upgrades, but I'm not optimistic for them. Or if BCH fucked up and put in a bad upgrade, but I'm also not worried about that.
Well, it's anyone's guess. We can be almost sure that Bitcoin is not gonna get too many opcodes in there.
Yes.
So how important this will turn out to be in the future, we'll see. Cognizability. I don't think recognizability. How easy it is to recognize. There are some interesting things between traditional and non-Bitcoin, but there is no Bitcoin versus BCH contention here. Acceptability, basically adoption, right? How many people are using this thing? The more people are using a network, the more valuable the network is. That's the acceptability property, and that is why I'm betting on Bitcoin compared to the rest of the properties, which certainly leaves room for arguments.
Yeah, do you want me? My take on this one is, it's true. Like I said before, BTC certainly has like a greater number of daily active users right now, and that's undeniably true. And that's somewhere BCH needs to create an advantage somehow, right? And how is it going to do that? Well, it comes back to what I was saying before about people coming into BTC and then leaving. Is that over the last 6 or 7 years, BTC's number of on-chain users has not grown. So even though it has a network effect advantage right now, that effect is static or shrinking because time is allowing alternatives to catch up, essentially. So I like to think about things, in terms of the first derivative in calculus, right? It's not the absolute number, it's the rate of change of that number. And BTC, it's just been flat for all those years. BCH is absolutely smaller, but it has a better rate of change. It's slowly growing, and it's starting to pick up speed now because we have better apps and we have better adoption tooling and so forth being developed all the time. Now, what's really interesting is that acceptability is also localized. It's important at a global scale, but it's localized. So we'll talk about El Salvador in a minute is one example for BTC, but then you have, like, for BCH, you have, St. Kitts, you have Bitcoin Cash City in Townsville, you have Tacloban in the Philippines, you've got areas in Argentina, right? Within those areas, at least within the BCH community within those areas, BCH is just like dominating. And if you go there and try and spend BTC, it doesn't matter if in the world there is 100 times as many BTC as BCH people. If in the city you're in, everyone's a BCH adopter, then BCH has the network effect advantage locally, and that makes a huge difference, because then you could say, well, then you have a model of competing hubs of adoption. And for as far as I know, one example of where there's kind of a mixed adoption and competition going on is at New Hampshire, right, in Porkfest and stuff like that. There's often people talking about at Porkfest which currencies are being used, and there's kind of a floating market there, as people who go every year will say that BTC adoption has been declining, Monero adoption has been going up, and BCH adoption, I think, has been, kind of flat. And then there's maybe Dash, there's like gold backs, so that's kind of like a little scientific experiment going on there where you have a competing market. But I don't mind so much if BCH has lower global adoption in the short term. It will need more in the long term, but in the short term, as long as we have very strong local hubs, because people join the network at the edges of those hubs faster than they just pick it up randomly in different places, and the network effect is multiplied by proximity in that way. So I'm really glad that BCH has those very strong hubs, and as far as I'm aware, much stronger than BTC, which has kind of El Salvador and not any other great hubs, at least that people are promoting that I've seen.
What could be right, because it's hard to use Bitcoin in person. Those are usually lower value transactions, and people didn't yet figure out which Lightning wallet works. And then, okay, we have arrived to the most important, most contentious, most problematic things, which is the portability and fungibility of Bitcoin. This is what Satoshi could not figure out. This is where we are lacking. We are not able to send Bitcoins fast, cheap, meaning portability, and anonymous, meaning fungibility, enough. So it is a fact that we are not able to do that. There are many ways we can get into this. Maybe let me explain what I wanted to build with Wasabi Wallet. With Wasabi Wallet, first I wanted to build the anonymity. I did that with Wasabi Wallet 1.2. We made the things completely anonymous, but it was hard. It was very expensive. So then with Wasabi Wallet 2.0, we made it orders of magnitude cheaper and faster, and And actually, I think Wasabi has the best user experience despite its coin joins on desktop. So Wasabi was the only non-custodial Bitcoin wallet that had like a 50% team to work on. So, and most of them were developers. And I was very annoyed by developers who are trying to complicate stuff. So it was perfect chance of building something beautiful. But anyway, the point is that it was still 10 times more expensive than a normal Bitcoin transaction, even though it was anonymous. So what can we do there? We have an anonymous currency, which is like super expensive for any medium well-off person, right? If you're poor, there is no way it's worth for you to use it. If you are well-off, then it's gonna be still expensive, and if you are super rich, then it's gonna be whatever. So my idea is that we created a Lightning Network research. Well, obviously Bitcoin is not gonna scale in any other way than the Lightning Network, except if you want to scale with custodial services, and I do not want that because the security property must be under control. So there is literally nothing else but the Lightning Network. But the Lightning Network's privacy sucks. It sucks in practice, but so we created this Lightning Network research, put one Bitcoin, and researchers were researching and stuff. And what my conclusion was, the entire thing is that Lightning could be anonymous if a couple of things are fixed and the on-chain anonymity leaks don't leak onto the Lightning Network. The problem is that on all the Lightning Network research where they break the Lightning Network anonymity this way and that way, it was almost always that, hey, on chain, you knew that this person was doing these things, and therefore Lightning Network doesn't matter, because so the point was the on-chain anonymity, lack of anonymity leaked onto the Lightning Network. And this might be actually something very important lesson for Monero people as well, because they keep saying that privacy by default. No, sorry, that's I'm 100% agreeing with that. Privacy by default is my slogan as well, for fuck's sake. No, the other thing, they keep saying that you have to have privacy on the base layer. And I'm pretty sure they think it means the same thing as privacy by default. But no, you actually have to have privacy on the top layer. That's the most important privacy. So having privacy on the base layer makes it easier for you to build privacy on the upper layers. But you have to have privacy on the upper layer. So example, Tor anonymity network. You are using Tor to do something on your Facebook, right? Like, it could be that Tor is completely anonymous, yet you're on your Facebook, you're not anonymous. So, but an example would be Tor itself, that, hey, the ClearNet is completely non-anonymous, and yet you can build a system on top of that, which is the upper layer, which is Tor, which is anonymous. So it's always the upper layer that must be fully anonymous, the uppest layer. That's a long thing. So what my idea was with Wasabi is that we built privacy. Okay, very good. And now what we have to do is make it cheaper and faster. And for that, the Lightning Network, we have to work on the Lightning Network. Unfortunately, Wasabi has stopped. No, the company behind Wasabi stopped, the money stopped, the development stopped, and building a private Lightning Network in my estimation, was a much larger job than building Wasabi Wallet 2.0, which was a huge job, like a really huge job. So I don't know who's gonna do that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a sobering note to end on there. But I would just say that, so for me, I agree that this, portability and fungibility, this is, like I said at the start when I was walking through it, this is where BCH already has an advantage. The problem is for BCH is that it already is far more portable in terms of cheaper, faster. We haven't screwed things up with RBF and so forth. The problem is that it's a lot better than BTC, but it's not way better than all the other alternatives, Litecoin or Dash or whatever. If they all were as expensive and slow and stuff as BTC, then people would converge on BCH very fast. But the problem is, even if this gives BCH an advantage over BTC, it doesn't give it that much of an advantage against those alternatives. So that's where the network effect is more important, of local adoption hubs. That's where the programmability of better DeFi and stuff comes in and needs to give us an edge over time. As far as the fungibility, the lower fees also help with that, right? Because if you have lower fees, you can afford coin joins and mixing much more easily. And also the fact is the culture plays into this quite a lot, I think, too, because even if it's not directly a privacy mechanism, in practice, a lot of these things come down to in theory versus in practice, right? In practice, you can get better privacy if you have a strong culture of P2P cash spending, because if the less people are sending money back to the exchanges or sending it into Lightning channels where they sit for ages and then people can observe where they're going out, the more people are paying each other directly in BCH, the more the privacy goes up for everyone, because only you and that person, obviously it's listed on the blockchain, right? But you and that person know about that and not necessarily everyone else. So that's why I think it's really, really important that the BCH community maintains that strong circular economy. And I think we're doing a good job of that, but I think it's going to really start to ramp up as our tooling gets better. So like what you were talking about with Wasabi, my version of that is Selene, right? We have Selene wallet that we've made, and so far, like you said, it's a big job. We've spent about 2 years getting it to the stage that it's fast and easy and usable, and people can onboard other people. They can have multiple wallets. They can have it in any language, all these different elements that we've built into it. But over the next couple of years, the focus is going to start shifting to the DeFi stuff to make it more usable, and also the adoption and privacy stuff. So if we can build in Cash Fusion, people have requested that many times. It's on the roadmap. We'll see about that, right? That's one thing. Helping people to find local merchants, helping people to use P2P purchasing services and find meetup groups where then they can trade with people P2P. All that kind of stuff can really help with our portability and fungibility elements. So I think BCH already has an advantage here, but we've got to explode that advantage. Like you said, if it's currently 5 times or 10 times better, it needs to be 100 or 1,000 times better, because those orders of magnitude have to outweigh the lack of hash rate and the lower security and the lower adoption, globally speaking, the lower liquidity, the lower recognizability to some extent. Like we talked about, BTC and BCH are equally recognizable in terms of if your node accepts the transaction, it's valid. You don't have to investigate it. You always know it's valid. But they're not equal in terms of BCH has a much smaller brand. If you talk to people on the street and you say Bitcoin, they'll think of BTC, right? So BCH, except in those local adoption areas I talked about. So BCH also has to catch up there. But yeah, I think portability and fungibility, we've already got an edge, and we're going to increase that edge unless the BTC community makes some serious moves, which I don't think they are, or I haven't seen them doing it anyway.
Can we talk about the block size?
Yeah, sure.
So on Bitcoin, ideally, the largest block size that could happen is 4 megabyte. What about BCH?
So right now, when the split happened, it was 1 megabyte, it got raised to 8 megabytes. Then a couple of years later, it got raised to 32 megabytes. And then earlier this year, in May, the BCH community added something called ABLA, Adjustable Block Size Limit Algorithm, which starts at 32 megabytes. So it can't go lower than that. It will always be minimum 32. But as traffic grows on the network, it automatically adjusts the block size, kind of like the difficulty algorithm, every single block up or down a little bit. So if more traffic is happening, let's say more than 16 megabytes is happening consistently, it will start raising the limit, and it always tries to keep like a buffer above the limit. And then if people stop using it, if traffic goes down, then it starts to lower it again. So it can't just suddenly shoot up to a value that miners or other, wallet providers, fulcrum server operators, those kind of people, they can't suddenly be caught off guard by this huge change. The limit, if it was maxed out, if everybody was just going crazy, the whole world is flooding into BCH, then it can go up maximum of 2x per year. So even if all the blocks were full 32 megabytes for a whole year, it would raise it up to 64 megabytes. But obviously that would require very intense demand for BCH. But there's also one other element, which is that it's kind of elastic. It's sort of intelligent. So it's 2x per year if it's maxed out all the time. But if it's not maxed out, it can go up to 4x per year in kind of the first year. So like if there was a sudden big surge of adoption that we got, it could 4x, but then after that it would slow down, and over a 5-year period it would average back down to 2x. So that's where the BCH community is at the moment. But obviously that's a best effort kind of guess that we've made. It's all been tested. I can send you the details afterwards if you're interested. But we'll be monitoring, because if the limit is too slow, if it's too fast, if mining is centralizing, if there's some other problem, obviously we can tweak and adjust it, which you don't want to be doing too much, because that will take time and effort away from other things. But if we somehow got it wrong, then we can always make a change there.
Okay, so if we divide 32 by 4, then we get 8. Which doesn't get 8x, which doesn't get to 1 order of magnitude yet, right? So if you want to put something on Bitcoin, put orders of magnitude larger improvements on Bitcoin, then you have to have, large.
Very, very large, yes. So it will keep growing, right? The idea is that, like I said, there's a limit to how fast it can go, but there's no top limit, right? The BCH community is genuinely believing that in 15 years or 20 years maybe, that we will have gigabyte or even terabyte blocks. I think there's a really good article that somebody, what's his name? Let me just look it up. It's called Terabyte Blocks for Bitcoin Cash, right? The idea is that, let's say in 20 years time, not immediately, here we go, Johannes Vermorel, he has this really good article where he talks about how you could get to a state where you had billions of people transacting and terabyte blocks, and I think that's where we're going. And the problem was that this really became a huge disaster, basically, because after the BCH community split off, there was the BCH community, like who we have now, who were saying, okay, we'll do terabyte blocks, but like in 20 years, once technology is improved, once we have X thinner, once we have huge adoption, once the entire world is devoting resources to building out the infrastructure for this, et cetera, but obviously you wouldn't do that today. And then you had the BSV guys who were like, terabyte blocks today, instantly, and they kind of fucked it up for everyone because they ruined the messaging, which is like, yeah, you could have gigabyte blocks, but not today. And that's a very big difference, gigabyte blocks in 10 years versus today. But those BSV guys were just lunatics, and that made it very hard to have a rational explanation of how this would go in practice.
Okay, so first of all, a dynamic block size limit was always, my position was always that we should increase the block size. My position was always that we shouldn't really increase it more than twice as big as how much the SegWit things are, just to keep it conservative. And my position, no, it's not even a position. My developer intuition is that a dynamic block size makes more sense than a constant, right? And my developer intuition that almost any dynamic algorithm works better than a constant does. But okay, with that out of the way, what I'm afraid of is the unknown unknowns, the things that we do not know, because there are known gray swans, there are known problems that something that's only known probably for me. I have something that only I know, and I'm wondering how many other people know stuff that big block might break. So my personal problem in Wasabi Wallet is the private information retrieval. So you have a blockchain, and that blockchain is huge, and somehow you as a user want to know stuff, what happened on that huge blockchain. But you want to know it in a way that no one knows what information you're interested in, because if someone learns what information you're interested in, then they learn what your wallet balance is. Okay, so the only light wallet private information retrieval system that is in existence, and this was 2 years of my research leading up to Wasabi Wallet, was the client-side filtering algorithm of Neutrino, whatever. So client-side filtering. And that relies on having a filter on a server that the client gets. So imagine it's something like a SPV header chain, but it's a filter chain instead of a header chain. So the thing is that filter chain on Wasabi Wallet is, I don't know, at this point, maybe 200 megabyte or something like that. And that's for the Bitcoin blockchain. And that's already barely passing as a light wallet. So now multiply it by 8, right? That's not going to be a light wallet. And if this is the only way how a private light wallet can be built today, there might be other ways, but no one have invented them yet. But if this is the only way today, then what larger blocks would do is break privacy, right? Unless you're running a full node, you don't. No, that's not a true sentence. But it would break light wallet privacy, because you would use this client-side filtering architecture like Wasabi does, and no one would have no one would dare to say that they are light wallets anymore, because they are not that light. So I don't know what problems other people would encounter, and maybe I would be able to fix this one, right? Like, it might be possible, but there are so much fear to me that larger blocks break things I don't know about.
Yeah, well, it's definitely possible. And I mean, one thing I have to say straight out is that obviously nothing is free. There's no solutions, only trade-offs, right? So with BCH, if you're raising the block size, you are going to get greater throughput on the chain. You're going to get greater anonymity set of on-chain transactions, and so forth, right? But there is definitely a cost. It is does make things like initial block download slower. Again, there's solutions with UTXO commitments and so forth, right? But you're essentially creating a compromise and then trying to shore up those compromises. It's definitely not perfect, like you were talking about things like requesting your balance. If you have a tiny blockchain, you can just put off requests for 50 different things, or you can and then you're only looking for one of them, right? So you can create like a cover over that, or like you said, you can have techniques with the filters and so forth, right? So BCH certainly is not the strongest on this, and that's an area that I haven't focused too much on this show, but I would really love it if we did. My attitude towards that, mostly at the moment, is we've got bigger fish to fry. Basically, we need to create more adoption. We need to build more DeFi. We need to get bigger traction in the media and so forth. And then that will bring in privacy experts like yourself or like other people who want to build those tools and help solve those problems. I don't have all the answers for that kind of stuff at the moment. I'm sure though that if we get enough brain power involved and invested in fixing it, that maybe we'll not be able to find something perfect, but we'll be able to find something kind of good enough. To me, Bitcoin is always about good enoughs, like the certain block size is a spectrum. Lower is better in some respects, right? But the problem is you're just giving up too much. And the BTC community, I think it's amazing that a lot of them have this idea of, like you said, a constant block size, and they think that that's just the perfect number. And it's like, no, well, if smaller is better, why don't you do 500 kilobytes? Why don't you do 100 kilobytes? And some people want that. Luke Jr., Bitcoin Mechanic, they've talked about we should do 300 kilobytes, right? And that would have advantages. But to me, the trade-offs are just overwhelmingly in favor of the network effect, the lower on-chain fees, and it's just how Bitcoin was designed. Bitcoin was designed to be insanely efficient. The fact that a single transaction is just a small amount of information sent across the network, and so you pay a very small fee for that because it doesn't cost very, very much, but that fee then pays for that replicated storage, and it all just works out. It's all super efficient. So that's why I've never really understood these high fee alternatives. But just to be straight up, like, I don't have a great answer for you that there would be perfect solutions. Probably the more programmability we can add, also the better chance that somebody can find an answer to that kind of thing. So that's where I'm kind of like more power, more solutions, given enough developers and enough time. As for other unknown unknowns, things break, and that was again where the BSV community created a huge grief for us, because they went out and said, oh, you should just limit test and you should just push as much data, and then they broke all their wallets and they broke their nodes and they had all these disasters, and they told the exchanges, if you don't know how to run a node, you're an idiot, rather than listening to their concerns and all that. And that all got sort of mixed in as like irresponsible big blockers, where the BCH community is very conscious of this stuff, and all the larger block sizes, everything is really well tested. A lot of work is done on the nodes and on the tooling and in outreach to exchanges and service providers and so forth to make sure the reliability of BCH is really, really good. But that's not something we can just take our eye off the ball on. Technology improves, which helps, but it's also up to us to continually hammer away on that and make sure that we're not just getting complacent, because if you do, then things will break. It's not like you can just double, it's not like a car. You can't just put the speed up twice as much and do nothing and just it will work. No, it won't. You've obviously got to keep engineering the whole time.
I bet you didn't expect this to take 1.5 hours.
No idea. I don't mind. Yeah, I thought maybe it would. We said we'd go through it all. We got plenty of time. It's an important conversation, so I'm glad we're having it. And I'm really glad actually that your approach is very systematic. I like me, you're an engineer. I can see that in your approach. Is like we're going to go through the list one by one, and you're carefully considering each piece of the system, and then I imagine at some point you'll have a holistic assessment, right? You're going to come up with some kind of overall judgment, yeah?
You see, the problem with that kind of thinking is that you might be working with the wrong frame. Now, I think that is not the case right now, because you see, as I was building Wasabi Wallet and had to take on a role in that company that no one else did, which is I was always, at one point, for a couple of years, I was always thinking 3 years into the future, 3-10. I was living in the future. I didn't even know what's going on around me. I was just in my head thinking about what do the regulators do, what Bitcoin is going to do, what's about altcoins. So I really think I have found the right model to have these discussions, or at least to develop a Bitcoin wallet. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's been great. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's very interesting that your model matches up to exactly what I explained in episode 85. I talked about the three functions of money. Security, I think it's interesting that you've added that, but I kind of just basically lumped that under a combination of scarcity and recognizability, because if it's secure, if it's scarce and recognizable, then it will basically be secure. Portability, fungibility, acceptability, adoption, divisibility, and then you've got that. Programmability is one I'll have to think on more, because I might need to add that. I might need to say it's 7 properties of money instead of 6. But I think we're on the same page with most of that, and we're just watching it play out over time.
The most important thing is that there is no such a thing as intrinsic value.
Yes, of course. It's all subjective, and that's like everything in life, Somebody is like, the free market, oh, this price is too high. No, it's not. It might be too high for you. Maybe you don't want that thing that much, or maybe you don't have enough money, but that doesn't mean the price is too high. It's a price is what someone else is willing to pay for it, right? It's not up to you to judge whether or not. And that's what we've seen on the whole cryptocurrency markets. Some BCH people get very salty about the BCH price being lower. No, it's lower because less people are willing to pay a high price for it. BTC price is high, but it's volatile, and over time that can change. So you just wait and see.
Sorry. I have a quick question. So what is your take? Like, I assume, having this hope and I guess optimism for Lightning Network, that you read the Ellen white paper, and I'm curious what your take on is about them saying that they need 133 megabyte blocks.
So I wrote an article. It was titled, "How do you scale a blockchain?" And let me see if I can recall. The text, the content of the article was, "Just kidding, blockchains don't scale." So what's my take on Lightning Network needing a huge 32 megabyte blocks, right? I did hear about someone's doing a calculation and saying that, even if Lightning Network is adopted and working and great, it's still not gonna be able to serve the entire world's population. And I tend to believe that calculation is true, but I never done it for myself. But then there are, you see when I bring this up, it's always like, but there's going to be China factories, and I don't know, like there are answers, and I don't know if they are just they're just throwing words at me, or they actually like are the
Like,
solution.
understand. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's I have this meme which I really like I've referenced it before on this show, that I think the BTC community is a bit prone to that kind of word salad attack, where you can see they don't want to talk about BCH, but they'll talk about anything else. They'll talk about BitVM, drive chains, Lightning Network, Arc, channel factories, coin pools like Litecoin, different custodians, eCash, Fedi mints. Like, it's just, you just receive this like overwhelming tidal wave of like one-line things that you don't have time to look into, but everybody is sure that that's going to be the fix and whatever. And then in 6 months' time, oh, it didn't really work out. We found there were some other problems with it. But the ETH community does the same thing as well, but they just have a different set of ones. They go with layer 2s and ultrasound money. They have all the whole range of them. So yeah, it's hard to know what is true and what is fake, except to me, my default assumption is it's basically all fake until proven otherwise, and time tends to just clean away those dodgy solutions, basically.
Well, I do have a feeling that innovation kind of stuck on Bitcoin lately, but maybe not even just on Bitcoin, maybe on all the cryptocurrency stuff. But we have to remember that innovation is not linear. It's like a long time nothing happens, maybe some improvement, and then Bitcoin comes along and innovation of money. So I think we need a big innovation like that to reinvigorate the cryptocurrency space. And I have a dream, like how I am going to achieve that. Okay. But that's not going to be anytime soon. So just quickly, so firstly, I need $1 billion, and if I have $1 billion as cash, not like company stock or no, like personal cash, and if I have $1 billion, then I am 99% sure that I can build something on top of Bitcoin in complete stealth mode within a year with a bunch of developers that is going to be instant, anonymous, and keeps all the properties that we just talked about. Now, and then if actually, if someone creates such a system that is anonymous, instant, and almost free, then there is, and keeps all the Bitcoin properties, then there is no way that thing is not going to take over the world within half a year like ChatGPT did. Yes. So that's my plan. And now the question is, how am I going to make $1 billion?
Michael Saylor, get him on the phone. Michael Saylor, what's going on, buddy? I got an idea. I want to pitch this. Have you tried that?
Well, does he even have that much? I mean, I'm talking about $1 billion. That's a big amount, Like,
can you do a proof of concept for like, 2 mil?
I don't think so. It's so with Wasabi Wallet, we were talking about tens of millions of dollars, right? I didn't pull out the $1 billion out of my ass. With Wasabi Wallet, we could get this far only with tens of millions of dollars. So then that's a problem, because we didn't have a mobile wallet, we didn't have all kinds of languages, we didn't have Lightning Network, we didn't make Lightning Network private, and we didn't figure out what to do. Like how to serve all the entire world population, right? Like you just said, it's 32 megabyte blocks for Lightning Network to be able to. So there are big problems to be fixed, and with Wasabi Wallet, with tens of millions, we couldn't get there. So we need to get orders of magnitude more money than tens of millions, and that's where I settled on the billion. Right.
Quick correction on the Lightning Network thing. It's 133 megabyte blocks.
Even better.
Exactly. Even better. So let's talk a little bit about then El Salvador. You know, in that clip that we showed on the show when we were talking about in that episode, you were saying that BTC is failing in El Salvador. The Lightning Network isn't really getting the job done. It's not working. I haven't been to El Salvador ever in my life, Bitcoin or otherwise. I don't know what's going on there. Have you? I don't know. You might even be there now. Are you there now? Have you been there? What's going on with the Bitcoin adoption on the ground?
I'm not the best person to talk about Bitcoin adoption on the ground of El Salvador, but I have been there 2 years ago, and it is happening. It is happening with Lightning Network. The government tried to push a wallet called Chivo, which was a piece of shit software. The entire El Salvador population started with the Chivo wallet, and they were like, okay, this doesn't work, and so Bitcoin failed. But so that was a rough start. But now people are using the Lightning Network down on the ground, and of course the worst practices that you can imagine, like custodia, whatnot. But it works, right? Since we are in El Salvador, there are even problems like blackouts. When I was there for, I think it was a week or 2 weeks, there were daily blackouts, right? So if your Wi-Fi goes down, you're not gonna pay with Bitcoin, well, unless you have mobile internet, which is not fully covered. So there are these infrastructure problems, but ultimately it's impressive how many people started using Bitcoin in El Salvador. That's pretty much the adoption. What am I gonna say? Yeah, you guys, I don't know if it was you, but there was many Bitcoin Cash people who tweeted about that the thing that I posted, and I don't think after this conversation it would come to a surprise to anyone that I believe that Bitcoin is just so not ready to be used by people down in El Salvador. It's missing portability and fungibility, right? Like, and this is what I meant when I was saying that, well, us Bitcoin developers couldn't build the systems that you guys need. So all you can use it for now is to store your money.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the reason that was so popular is just because the BCH community has just suffered so many years of being gaslit, basically, by people saying Lightning Network is the best, Lightning Network is going to fix this, it's all going to work out, we just need 18 more months, and blah, blah, blah. And so it's kind of like a salty, reaction to that, is that when the BTC community, which has mostly only happened over the last year or a little bit longer, that after 5 or 6 years of the BCH community being told Lightning Network is the answer, it's going to fix itself, and the BCH community saying no, it's not, for these reasons, here's the logical argument, okay, you're a shitcoiner, get out of here. Finally, the BTC community themselves started to say, okay, Lightning Network has some problems, even if we can fix it, we're going to have to go back and reevaluate from first principles, and whatever, this, that, and the other, right? So the BCH community just felt very, very vindicated by that, because it doesn't matter if we spent all this time saying the Lightning Network is, got problems, if we were just dismissed and whatever. But once the BTC community themselves were saying it, of course, everybody was like, oh, thank God, finally. So I think that's why it was very popular.
Now, let me ask an unfair question. It's going to be unfair because you don't deny negative anyway. There is some kind of thing. So why do you think the Lightning Network is work?
Why do I think the Lightning Network won't work? Yes, well, several reasons. Like, I've already got on my FAQs about this. Firstly, that I have no objection to the Lightning Network. And in fact, I think for the most part, most of the BCH community and the big block community before the split never did. If you go back and listen to the debates, what the big blockers are almost always saying is not, I hate the Lightning Network or that's broken or anything like that. What they were saying was, let's do a block size increase and the Lightning Network. Let's just not bet everything on the Lightning Network, which is what you said. That was kind of where the community chose to do, was just all in on Lightning Network. And that was a mistake, because you could have had the parallel on-chain development going at the same time, and you could have seen it proven out. Plus, they're synergistic, right? If you raise the block size limit, then you have lower on-chain fees, you have more on-chain capacity, and it's also easier to have your Lightning Network routing, because if you need to do a justice dispute transaction, that's cheaper and faster and more reliable. If you need to open or close channels to create fresh liquidity, that's cheaper and faster and more reliable. So actually, ironically, the Lightning Network would work much better on BCH than it would on BTC. And I don't think nobody was, well, I don't say nobody, but in my view, was never like, let's not do the Lightning Network. I was like, this is great. If people are enthusiastic about it, they think they can find a scaling solution here, they should absolutely do it. The problem was that it was set up to be, we've got Lightning Network, so we can not do a block size increase, or that's not necessary. So it was the false dilemma that was the problem more than the Lightning Network itself. As for the Lightning Network, why are the reasons that it's not going to work? Mostly it comes down to the restricted block size in part. Partly it's just very complicated thing to do, you know, once you, I don't need to tell you, I'm sure, like there's so much with the hash log contracts and everything like that. Is super complicated to get right, and timing it so that the liquidity is on the right side at the right time is an absolute nightmare. The routing of liquidity along a Lightning Network channel at scale is also a really, really difficult computer science problem, and that was obvious from the start. You know, if I've linked up to Jet and then Jet is linked up to you, and then the more people you add and the more links, because you don't have a live status of the entire network, it's very difficult to figure out a route. And then even once you do figure out a route, only one is very fragile, right? Only one link has to be broken because somebody else already moved the liquidity, and now your whole thing is screwed. So that's kind of a poor design compared to the layer one Bitcoin network, which is simple. It's just a flood network. You just send it out to everyone and everyone gets all the info. It's very simple and reliable. So that was a problem. Then you have the problem of the like I said, with the on-chain fees in an environment with rising fees, then that makes putting money in liquidity hard to do because it's expensive. It makes closing them cooperatively expensive, so that also captures people into the Lightning Network. And it's super bad for justice transactions, because if somebody is scamming you, especially in a scenario where the fees are floating, if the fees rise, then that's a perfect opportunity for them to scam you, because if the amount is lower than the fee, they can't close to settle the channel back to themselves, because it would cost them more than they've lost. So if your channel balance is less than $50 and fees hit $50, then whoever can scam the money right then. It's a perfect opportunity. So the reliable base chain and the fluctuating fees all has huge knock-on effects for Lightning Network. And then you also have the fact that it's just splitting the network effect, right? Because it's taking away developer mind share. If everybody in BTC, which is what happened, gets really excited about Lightning Network and all the VC money goes into it and all the developers are there and all the podcasts are talking about it and so forth, well, then everybody neglects the on-chain scaling, looking into infrastructure like Fulcrum, indexes. That same time and effort and money, some of it could go into Lightning Network, but if you bet everything on Lightning Network, then in the last, 7 years has elapsed and very little has been done to improve the layer one, because everybody got excited about the layer two. Ironically, that's the same thing that's happening in ETH, right? Is now everybody stopped caring about the layer one so much. Now they all care about the layer two. It's the same thing. So once you put all the resources there, then you grind your layer one development to a halt, whereas the BCH community just kept improving on the layer one. Like the whole time, and you can't get those 7 years back. So I don't know. That's a few problems. It's also just confusing to explain to people. Okay, we spent all this time trying to get everyone okay with the idea of Bitcoin, and then as soon as they started to get it, now you have to explain to them about the Lightning Network. It was also a problem because it reinforced all these false beliefs about nodes. You there, mate? NoPara has just checked out. I'll wait for him to come back a second. Anyway, Jeremy's Lightning Network rant getting underway there. How many reasons do you think we need that Lightning Network isn't going to work?
It's weird. I've never really given it any serious thought because I never felt like it was necessary to care, right? It shouldn't be necessary to care. If I'm the end user, like I'm signing up for a peer-to-peer system first off, not a hub and spoke system. Oh, there he is.
There we go. You're back, mate.
Oh, it was me?
Yes. Did you hear that? I can wrap up my final point there. But you heard most of that?
So I think what your point, one of your point is that the on-chain fees leak onto the Lightning Network to be
they
paid.
Cause problems. Yeah. They cause problems, yeah.
And there were things about complexity, which is like, I don't like that, because as developer, all we are doing is to abstract away complexity from other people. So it's like, you look at me, like we can see each other, yet you are like thousands of miles away, but
yes.
Crazy complexity is being abstracted away here. But
yes.
Of course, sometimes you encounter complexity that gets you fucked. And that's not good. And I think at this point we don't know if there is such a complexity that completely messes up the user experience or not. But the on-chain fees leaking to the Lightning Network is interesting, because something was in my mind. I just couldn't put this into words yet. So that could well be a bigger problem than I was aware of, for sure.
Any thoughts on the misallocation of resources? And I mean that both in terms of like VC money, developer time, and also community mind share, right? Everybody got super excited about Lightning Network. So they all in on that. And then very few people were working away on the L1. And that's also reinforced this whole culture of you've got to run your own nodes, which is a good thing. It's good. People are learning to run their own nodes and blah, blah, blah. But they did all that. And then now they had to run their own Lightning nodes as well. And there's just so much mess around that. You can see all the time on the forums, somebody trying to figure it out. My Lightning Network is broken, my node, blah, 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 blah. Any thoughts on that being a kind of distraction and a lost opportunity cost?
So, firstly, there is misallocation of resources in terms of, let's say, privacy developers go work on Monero instead of Bitcoin, which I believe they should be. I think there were much more privacy developers in 2015 when I started working on Bitcoin privacy than there are right now, right? So it's even though we have privacy now on Bitcoin, so it's sometimes the best way to predict the future is to invent it yourself. So misallocation of resources. There is also something interesting. So with Wasabi Wallet, we were thinking of, should we go into Lightning now or should we just wait? And ultimately, it always came down to some incentive here, that what is Lightning about? Lightning about handling small value transactions. And what is on-chain about? On-chain about handling bigger value transactions than small value transactions. So as a person, as a business, as an entrepreneur, where do you want to position yourself, into the flow of little money or into the flow of huge money? So we were always like, okay, we have time. Other people can figure things out with Lightning. It's just, it's the cherry on top of the cake. So I don't know, it doesn't worth. Maybe the people who don't think through where can they put the most value into, they go into working on Lightning because this is a cool new thing. But it, from basic incentive point of view, it doesn't work out working on Lightning.
Yeah, there's something else I wanted to touch on with you when we were doing that initial threads together, and also in the lead up to this episode. We got some very well-intentioned and very accurate, I guess you could say, criticism from Jay Thoreau on Twitter, who said that we hadn't been fair necessarily in our portrayal of BTC in El Salvador. And essentially his argument was that we said that there was custodians and all kinds of problems with the rollout and so forth. And his argument was, yes, there is, but that's, kind of being a bit overly simplistic, and that the sort of strategy is to onboard people into some of these custodial systems. He even said, quote, also the Salvadorian banking system is a KYC nightmare to deal with. So even custodial solutions are still a huge improvement over the status quo. The goal is for anyone to be able to take self-custody, but I hope you can acknowledge that nuance as well in your debate conversation, end quote. So what do you make of this idea that, okay, maybe it's not a perfect rollout? And I understand that, trust me, having worked on plenty of Bitcoin adoption myself, there's all kinds of, trade-offs, and even just making anything work so that people have an alternative to the fiat system, especially somewhere like El Salvador, is laudable. So I can see why it always feels a bit harsh to be doing so much hard work and then nevertheless get criticized, like, why isn't it perfect? It's like, well, maybe it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than nothing. So I can take that point of view. The criticism from the BCH side is more like, well, you've already lost the ground on doing it non-custodially and so forth. So then that's kind of ossifying that mentality, right? And that later on upgrading people onto non-custodial solutions is just not going to happen because the need isn't there. Once you've broken that, like the BCH rollouts, it's like, okay, we're just going to do everything non-custodially. And that might be harder to start with because we're not using these different crutches. But the point is, once it sticks, it's permanent and everyone's doing it non-custodially. Where if you sort of do things half measure and you intend to later on do it better, but then it just works out that, okay, everyone ended up in custodians anyway.
So, custodians. Okay, so what's the improvement if you're using Bitcoin with custodians? The improvement is that your government is not going to print more money. El Salvador is not printing already, so the US government is not going to print more money. So it's basically a store of value argument, right?
Or even just having access to fresh markets, like maybe if the banking system there kind of sucks and using these BTC solutions, they can somehow at least get access to global, BTC related markets.
Well, but the banking system sucks because of custodialism, so you're not solving it by introducing a custodial solution, right? In fact, you're introducing the volatility, right? The unit of account stability dimension, if someone remembers from previous conversation. So it even makes it worse. Now, look, I can imagine a custodial solution that I believe if it would take over the world, then I would be happy and content with that, even though it's custodial, which is the e-cash route, right? Electronic cash that's anonymous, fast, and and cheap to send, but it's custodial. Well, it would be still so much more improvement on what we have right now. But just a simple custodial Bitcoin, because it's without the anonymity, right? Like a simple custodial Bitcoin is not much of an improvement, I think. But it's not true that El Salvador is custodial. Well, maybe it's true. Maybe it's true that they are using Bitcoin dominantly in a custodial way. Even though I hear a lot of Lightning usage and I wonder how much is that, like advertisement, or some might call it propaganda. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm actually not sure. Well, okay. One more thing there. You mentioned that non-custodiality, like if we start with custodial, then we are not going to change to non-custodial later. But
well, you could, but people just tend to, once something's good enough, they just stop. They don't keep motivated to do something more difficult, right?
But if that is the case, then that just means non-custodiality doesn't matter enough. It's too weak of a differentiator. It's not helping the user that much to matter.
Yeah, that's a good point. But it's like security, like you said, custodians is fine until suddenly it isn't. Everyone's happy using FTX to trade until suddenly they're all fucking wrecked. It's the exact same. Like everyone's
security.
everyone's happy. Yeah, exactly. Everyone's happy enough, with their custodial half-working solutions in El Salvador until maybe, I don't know, maybe not, in a year's time, in 3 years' time, at some point, that maybe they just all get rugged, and then it will be like, shit, I wish we'd just done it the non-custodial way to start with. But then that would require...
they learned. And then they learned.
Yeah, well, that's right, exactly. Sometimes you can only learn the hard way. So speaking of that, let's get on to somebody who's learning. John Carvalho. I love this. All right, let me just read this out. Regular listeners to the show will know John Carvalho, and he made a big Twitter post recently with some updated thoughts he was having. Quote, "The only reason zero-conf payments stopped being an option for merchants and users is Bitcoin Core, which has now embedded double spending into the software as a default mode. I think there is a rationale to the idea that miners will always want the highest fee version of a transaction, but I also believe that the mempool network serves both users and miners, and that the mempools should be designed under a philosophy that is trying to fulfill the intent of the user. But I also believe there is a better strategy where we reasonably optimize for quantity of users and the quote-unquote money use case. I think Bitcoiners have it wrong to give in to double spending, and miners have it wrong to prioritize per transaction fees over use cases that would increase Bitcoin's value by velocity and quantity. In reality, replace by fee is no more enforceable than zero-conf anyway. This is evidenced by the transaction accelerators and direct submission services, and for inclusion of non-standard transactions. A motivated company could make deals with miners and pools to support other ways of handling transactions, like zero-conf, further fragmenting mempools. But at this point, it is quite clear that the prevailing culture of Bitcoin Core and social Bitcoiners is number go up at all costs, so I'm not sure it is worth arguing for Bitcoin as money anymore. The design Bitcoiners want today seems to be an updated banking system where people can't afford to pay on-chain. Then we will construct queues of people to create Lightning channels together using covenants, so Bitcoin enthusiasts can keep laughing about the Bitcoin circular economy. Meanwhile, Bitcoin will shed lower class, then middle class users, preferring the elite, bankers, public corporations, and governments. This will leave normal people to the wolves of shitcoinery until a legitimate quote-unquote silver to Bitcoin emerges, until we eventually have a spectrum of blue-chip blockchains competing for all of the value Bitcoin is shedding as it loses the money/commerce use case and fails to deliver on its promise of permissionlessness and censorship resistance due to government and banker capture. Good morning. Bitcoin is not for everyone. End quote. So this is John Carvalho. The chickens are really coming home to roost. As anybody on this show knows, we told him, the BCH community told him that Lightning Network was not going to work. And then after many years, he capitulated and said, okay, it's got a lot more problems than I thought. The BCH community told him for many years that replaced by fee was a stupid idea and was going to wreck the ability of everyone to do in-person payments. But he went with the Peter Todd crowd, and Peter Todd has since then now got default full RBF into Bitcoin Core. And so the whole thing is basically permanently sabotaged, which is exactly what everyone told him. So I posted to him and said the same thing I always do, which is he's welcome to come and join us on BCH anytime he wants, because we actually saved Bitcoin. But of course, he's going to have to do some public repentance first, because it's no point in him joining BCH if he doesn't admit, wait, you guys had it right and I had it wrong. Until then, he's just going to keep spinning up new rounds of cope. So that's what he's been doing. He's still kind of moralizing about how hard forks are bad, and he's still explaining away the poor treatment he had of Roger Ver, among others, by saying that, you know, the argument was about some stuff that it wasn't really related to, rather than just admitting, okay, he was both wrong and an asshole. So he's still kind of creating excuses and reasons to himself to avoid saying, okay, the BCH guys were right, I was wrong, and the proof is in the pudding. But I'm hopeful that, again, given time, one layer at a time, he's slowly getting there. And this is a big step forward, that he's admitted, okay, Bitcoin Core is basically sabotaged, and our culture of number go up is the opposite of people being able to use it, and they're trying to cut out any usability by lower and middle class users. So that's a lot of steps forward, and I congratulate him on those. What do you make of this, NoPara?
So firstly, let me note that I like John and I consider him as a friend. Now, what my reading, so it's, if I smoke some marijuana and I start writing down everything that comes to my mind, this is kind of what the result is, right? I think it's confused. I like a lot of things that he said, but I don't like a lot of things that he said, and I think most importantly for this show, I don't agree with the RBF things what he was saying.
So are you're okay with the full RBF default in Bitcoin Core? Do you think that's an upgrade or downgrade or what?
I think that's the logical conclusion of how the system works. I don't see. Okay, so look, we have a mempool, and transactions are going around in the mempool. Hooray! There is no RBF. So what happens here is that the nodes are deciding that the first transaction that I have seen is the valid transaction. And they are trying to propagate those transactions. This is the no RBF mempool. Okay, so what can happen here? The miners are incentivized to seek out transactions. Those are paying more, but the nodes don't want to propagate. So what can happen here are surprises. The user can be surprised. If I would want to double spend, then I would only have to find a single miner, not a single miner. I would have to find the miners, broadcast them the things, and surprise people with that. So full RBF aligns incentives and removes the surprises. So it is surprising for people that, oh wow, you can cancel the transactions. Well, unfortunately, that's what the logic takes us to. So it's not ideal. I would like every transaction to be final. It's getting back to portability, right? I would like every transaction to be final in the second it's broadcasted, but it's just not reality. Well, thank you for listening so patiently to that. I assume you guys think it's think in a completely different way about this.
Yeah, I mean, my logic around this is, and I think it's a good point, and it's one that John himself made on Twitter, and he said in that post, right, is that there's no way that you can stop that, right? It's technically always going to be possible that people will route around the node mempool layer and go straight to the miners and get a double spend in that way by paying more or just by being friends with the miner or whatever. My attitude, and I think the BCH attitude, is I like to summarize as follows, which is it's technically possible. There's a big difference between theory and practice, basically. So it's technically possible that anybody can go and burn down somebody else's house. But just because that's possible doesn't mean you need to put gasoline and matches on every single street corner and make sure it's happening. Or it's even easier to happen, right? Because somebody could say, oh, there's no problem having the gasoline and matches there, because technically somebody could always come along and burn down this house. So what does it matter if we have the matches and the gasoline is? But the difference is if you put it around everywhere, it just makes it a prevalent thing that people will do because it's available, right? So basically BCH has no first seen mempool policy, and guess what, 99.99%+ of the time that works perfectly. We don't have problems with RBF and people swapping things out. Is it technically impossible? No. But in practice, does it happen? Almost all of the time, also no. And that's great. And I like it that way. So I think distributing the gasoline and matches everywhere with RBF is a complete mistake. And it's part of the whole hijacking of Bitcoin. And that's why John Carvalho, he was a sucker. He bought the bait, like when Peter Todd and whoever was putting it in the first time, they said, don't worry guys, it's optional. It's not going to be the default. If you don't want it, leave it off, no problem. And the BCH has said, this is the thin end of the wedge. This is just the first step. And then they'll change it from it's just an option to they'll change it to it's maybe a recommended option, which they did, and then they changed it to, okay, it's just the defaults, which they have now, and then even if some people want to not have it, now it doesn't matter because now that first seen mempool policy, it's the opposite way around, which is that if you don't want to do that and you do want to have first seen policy, it's basically impossible because all the other nodes are just overwhelming you at this point, and they'll submit all the RBFs to you anyway. So yeah, this is just so obviously such a bad thing for using Bitcoin as a currency, but BTC is not. It's a store of value, and that's what the community wants, and that's what he correctly identified. So I think he's just in a tough spot because his ideology and his thinking is basically one of a Bitcoin casher, and it pretty much always has been, but his heart and his existing mentality and all his social capital, he is bet on BTC, and that's just creating a huge problem of contradiction for him. So yeah, once again, I feel sorry for him, and he's welcome to come to BCH anytime. I'm happy to talk to him anytime he wants to chat, but I can tell him it's going to be I'm not going to be mean or anything, but it's going to be blunt. So he's going to have to be willing to say, yeah, I was wrong about this stuff, because if not, he's going to get absolutely wrecked, because I'll just be like, weren't you wrong? And there's no other answer. So I have here a community comment of the week, which kind of illustrates this point. Comes from @Bamski, who said, quote, I would rather see fiat banks around the world become Bitcoin holders and custodians, dump their treasuries and securities, and become less reliant on central banks for international settlement than buy coffee with Bitcoin in a private, censorship-resistant manner, end quote. Now, importantly, this user would, then they said, clarified in the comments, they would prefer for both to be the case, but it's already the case that the BTC community has just essentially given up this whole, we're going to be a bank settlement, we're not going to be an end consumer currency. What started out as a small fringe minority opinion that nobody took seriously has now been slowly psyoped into essentially what a huge chunk of the BTC community believes and advocates for. So I think, this makes sense why this is what John is seeing and others are seeing and are like, where is the Bitcoin that we once remembered? What do you make of this, NoPara? Is that what you're seeing too, or you think this is still a fringe opinion?
No, I disagree with the premise here. It's like we have a choice, It's like...
What do you mean? Elaborate.
So either private censorship-resistant coffee or banks and whatnot are using it, right?
It's a false dilemma. You can try and do both, obviously, but the point is that the community, at least some parts of the BTC community, have now, if it, in a hypothetical where it was a false dilemma, they're more on the side of this bank to bank is the priority and the coffee is sort of the bonus, rather than the person to person coffee is the priority and the bank settlement is the sort of bonus or unavoidable option,
Oh, I see. Well, obviously the coffee is the priority because the bank settlement is already fixed, It's like you can't sit up.
Yes. Okay, interesting. But like if you were given the choice, if in some hypothetical scenario I said you can either make BTC perfect for coffee transactions and terrible for bank-to-bank settlement, or perfect for bank-to-bank settlement and terrible for coffee transactions, which would you pick?
Bank settlement, I think,
for
maximization of value.
Interesting.
If you want to maximize value created in the world, I think the largest transactions has to be taken care of before the smallest transactions.
Yeah, it's a reasonable argument. It's the same as it's what we were talking about before with the Pareto distribution. That seems to be a big part of the BTC BCH difference. Is the BTC argument is, well, we want to get the Pareto distribution of the value, and the BCH is basically we want to get the Pareto distribution of the number of transactions, because the more people that are using it, obviously the more end consumers you're touching, the more your network effect is, and so forth, right? So it's just a difference of philosophy there. But you see, that's why it's interesting that you would say the settlements is more important, because I think basically the BCH community would disagree, and that's now why we have two forks and they're competing, because there's two different sets of priorities, which then manifests in everything else. Okay,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, because it's unclear. It's unclear if you guys are making a trade-off here. It might be that settlements are a given for you, even. Okay, let's assume the block size stuff work. It is not impossible the block size increase works out better than anyone have ever thought. Then the settlements is kind of a given. I don't know why. Sorry, I cannot somehow explain it, but I have a big intuition that it is a red herring here.
Yeah. I'm not saying that there's like in the end BCH will do both, right? Just like youth would say in the end BTC will do both, once everything's been worked out in the grand picture. So I think we're both aiming for both, but there's a difference in the methodology. Do you prioritize this and then try and fix that, or do you prioritize this and then try and fix that later? So I think the BCH approach is, if we get all the people in the world trading with coffee, then the banks will obviously have to adopt it. And the BTC approach is the opposite. Is if all the money is going into BTC from the bank settlements, then the end consumers, will get rolled out to them and they will use it too, right? That's what I'm saying. It's just an interesting, even if the goal is the same, sometimes the journey is different, and sometimes that makes a huge difference, right? So obviously we're playing that.
Is the treasure.
Yes, exactly. The real coffee transaction was all the friends we made along the way. The real Bitcoin was all the podcasts we made along the way. That's the next level of thinking. Nobody else is really using Bitcoin except for the podcasters. That's the next level narrative that nobody started yet. Wait until that kicks in. Forget about Citadel's podcast. That's the way to be. Okay, we got we had a good chat last night to a few of the BTC developers, not including yourself, unfortunately. I don't know if you heard about this or you knew about this. Maybe you're busy, I don't know. But anyway, we talked to some of these BTC developers. We've just kept things technical. Callisti organized this space. It went really well, actually. I think it was really interesting. We had a pretty good turnout in terms of listeners, and I think people really enjoyed it. So the link is on the slide if you want to listen to it. It was about 3 hours long. Quite a lot of chat about different elements of BTC and BCH development. But I think the most interesting bit of it, actually, if I had to summarize, was not even in that 3 hours. It was in the lead up, where one of the BTC developers, Reardon, was talking to Shinobi and other people on his own space, and he said that he was going to do this space. So we've got a little clip here of what he said in the lead up to the space.
Is that I'm going to talk to the Bitcoin cashers on Friday. I don't know how that's going to go. The idea here is that we're going to avoid talking about the philosophy of big blocks versus small blocks, and we're going to instead focus on ideas about programming UTXO blockchains based on Bitcoin script. That sounds like a really productive conversation avenue to have with them, and we'll see how that goes.
I'm coming to that. that doesn't require travel and hotels.
Yeah, so join, listen in on that spaces. I think it's going to be, I've said this before, I'm kind of loosely friends or acquaintances with the guy who made Satoshi Dice back in the day. He himself is a big blocker. He's also one of the smartest humans I have ever interacted with. And so I think there is an opportunity here potentially for us Bitcoiners to learn from Bitcoin Cash folks, because again, some of them are incredibly smart. And the fact that they have either a socioeconomic background or a gap in their game theory that says they appreciate big blocks does not reduce the value of their intelligence around how to program blockchains. So looking forward to that, even though I have like an emotional block around it that I'm kind of actively trying to overcome that you may hear as I'm talking about it.
Oh, dude, there's a good number of fucking like pretty smart Bcashers. It's just the fucking idiots screaming never-endingly, not letting 2017 go, that are fucking morons.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. I'm kind of one of those fucking morons. I'm just on the Bitcoin side of it, where it's very hard for me to let that go, but I'm trying because I think there's value there.
Yeah, so I got to say, like, firstly, hats off to both of these guys. This is a big step forward. I'm glad that the BTC and BCH community have been able to be more communicative and more collaborative, and things are not being dragged down into the past and rehashing that over and over, as that space has proven, and as this podcast and others have done. I really look forward to more and more collaboration. And I think especially Reardon, like, hats off to him for saying, it's difficult, and he has these, emotional biases and things built up over years. And obviously a lot of people on the BCH side do too. And it's been really good that over time, everybody's been able to kind of lower their weapons a little bit. And that's been a very positive trend that I look forward to continuing. But it's great to hear also that, the BCHs are being acknowledged, at least some of them, as being intelligent rather than, sort of demonized as these scams. So that's fantastic. But I thought this clip was also super interesting because it's like we saw previously with the BTC spaces, where basically the rising prominence of BCH, as well as the advanced technical development that we've got going on, is forcing confrontations with the reality that necessitate coming up with an explanation as to what's going on here. So we saw previously the whole Americans in the space race analogy slash explanation of why BCH had shipped OpCat and BTC hadn't. Here, Reardon has these two ideas that the BCHs have a gap in their game theory. That means they're like, that's completely false. There's no gap in the game theory, but that's how he can explain to himself how all these super smart people are into BCH, at least for the time being. The other one about socioeconomic status, I thought that was a really interesting way to phrase it. That's kind of true, but kind of not. It's not that. It makes it sound like BCHs are into BCH because they're poor and they can't afford the on-chain fees, when it's not really that that's the case. It's that the BCH community is more empathetic to people who need to make those low-fee transactions, maybe because it's their scenario, or maybe just because they understand that in the world with 8 billion people, there's a lot that are gonna need that. So, those are the current sets of explanations, the latest set that we've seen about why BCH, has all these smart people who are somehow wrong about big blocks. Shinobi's take is even more interesting. He draws a fresh distinction, which I've never heard him make before, and I think is indicative of the changing narrative, that instead of BCHs being dismissed out of hand, which he is known for certainly having done at least once, so now he has to partition things a little bit and make a distinction that some of them are okay or smart, but the other ones were screaming about the past and that they're, not worth talking to. Now, that's true because the regressive BCH victim mentality whining, which is something I've done a lot myself to try and heal the community from, is very unattractive, and he's right to note that. But he's also sort of minimizing the fact that that wasn't from nothing. There's a lot of legitimate grievances there in terms of censorship, in terms of hijacking of the project, in terms of the fact that it's no longer the P2P cash system on the BTC side that it once was. So we didn't hear any acknowledgement about any of that. But I think, it just goes to show that sort of dunking on the BCHs is no longer viable, because the solid technical work that we're doing, the solid adoption work, and also the good attitude of the community and being open and communicative and honest is earning us some recognition. So I thought that was really important, and I thought the space that we did was really good, and I look forward to doing more. NoPara, do you have a take on any of this?
I don't know if you knew, but a couple of years in the beginning of my Bitcoin career, I have hosted a podcast with Shinobi every week for a couple of years. So
didn't know that.
We were big buddies. He's certainly the most opinionated person I've ever worked together with.
Yes.
I since this is a confession time, or I don't know, I have a little confession to make here. I recall with Shinobi, we created a video about catching Roger Ver on a lie, and we were feeling very smart about it. That young people. I'm pretty young. I don't know if you know, but I'm pretty young. We were young, and young people like, okay, the big Roger Ver, we caught you. And I even wrote an article about it, and I titled it "Roger Ver Lies." But like maybe half a decade ago, or quite a couple of years ago, I started growing up, and I realized that I took down that article because even though I think it was factually correct, it was nitpicking, and I don't want to. I think Roger. Okay, so first of all, Roger Ver was one of my Bitcoin hero, right? So when he came out on the block size debate and started attacking developers who were also my Bitcoin heroes, I felt really betrayed by him because anyway, I felt really betrayed by him when I was young, and I was kind of angry, you know. But later on, I took down my article because I still believe that Roger has good intentions, and I don't wanna like mess with spread bad things about people who I believe they have good intentions, not malicious actors. So I guess that's my little confession here.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, it's similar in the case that on this show, you know, I am very vocally critical of a number of people. I've done it right here, right? But I do try and do it in a way that is, you know, open and honest. And I'm not trying to be insulting or trying to be, you know, there's a fine line about, you know, being aggressive, right? Because I have to kind of make the point seriously, but I will say what I say on this show. I would say it directly to any of these people if they were willing to come on the show, you know, and I'm happy to talk to any of them about it. And I'm also willing for them to come on the show and tell me I'm wrong and explain why, you know. But at the same time, you know, sometimes there's got to be a bit of like tough love, you know, like we're not going to be able to get through all the amount of like propaganda and lies and all the divisions and discord and all that stuff unless we can just be frank and honest, you know. So I think in that same way, I'm always trying to appreciate that. I know that these guys who I'm criticizing are very passionate Bitcoiners, and I say that often, you know. I know that they really are working all day, every day, just like I do. They wake up in the morning, they're thinking about Bitcoin, what can they do to spread adoption, you know, talking to their friends and family, working on their businesses, working on development, whatever. So in that way, we're all in the same boat, you know, and I try and have empathy for that, but at the same time, it's just kind of necessary that I have to expose some of the areas where I believe they're wrong, because otherwise we can't make progress. And sometimes if nobody tells you the truth, you know, you never hear it. So, but I think, yeah, you're right. You know, that's. And I also try not to be hypocritical about that, you know, like anybody is welcome to come on this show and try and, you know, flame me or roast me on Twitter. That's all right. I'm a very hard guy to offend or upset. So I'm a big boy. I can take it, I promise. Okay, let's get on to some questions. Let's maybe skip this other slide. I think we've already kind of covered that, unless you wanted to talk about it. But you said you had quite a few questions you maybe wanted to ask in the lead up to this show. Have we already covered some of that with what we discussed, or was there other things that you wanted to ask about?
I think I asked quite enough, brought up enough topics here.
Okay, all right, perfect, cool. Well, let's just get on then to meme of the week. I thought this maybe summarized it a bit. This whole Olympics meme, people have been loving the shooting at the Olympics, the pistol shooting. And I don't even know who all these characters are, but there's literally like been about 10 different ones who all have these different insane get-ups, like Dragon Ball Z Vegeta, like eyeglasses and like sniper rifles. And the meme is just this two guys. The top guy is doing like some kind of insane assassin pose lean with his gun and his headband and his eye filter and all that. And then on the right is the BTC logo, like kind of a bit overcomplicated and, you know, making a bit too much of it. And then the lower one is this guy who's been insanely popular from Turkey. this guy with his like silver hair who's just basically just holding out the gun and just not being pretentious about it, and that's the BCH meme. So just because this was on trend, I thought, to me, this is kind of how it is, like the Lightning Network, and like I explained, all coin pools and all those hundreds of things, like how much different stuff can you put into it when really you just got to get straight to the point, which is how BCH does it. So I don't know, this made me laugh, but I don't know, NoPara, does this ring true to you, or is this just unfair and insulting?
I'm following this Salde algorithm for a very long time, and he has really good memes, and I keep checking these, and every once in a while he reminds me that he's a Bitcoin Cash guy.
Yes, he mixes it in there. Yes. Usually he doesn't. Usually he has more Liberty memes, or it's just pro Bitcoin overall. And then once in a while he just has the BTC versus BCH ones. And it's always funny because then the comment section is full of people being like, I love all your other memes, but just fuck this one, man. What are you doing? So he keeps it spicy as well. He gets a bit of real talk in there once in a while. Okay, a couple of other things, a little bit of news to announce. 94% of the BTC and BCH supply is now in circulation, so there's less than 6% inflation to go for both chains. That was passed at 19,740,819 BCH, and then also for BTC. So I'm feeling good about that. We're on track as fiat hyperinflation continues. Western Digital have announced a 128 terabyte consumer SSD hard drive. So good to see that our big block storage probably shouldn't be an issue. And BCH gurus have launched full BCH Play and done their second snapshot and distribution of their Furu tokens. So I highly recommend everyone to go and check out bch.guru and play the prediction game there. And if you are a guru holder, you will be getting some dividends. I think at the moment they've got about like $1 or $2 of dividends to distribute to 6,000 gurus. So definitely don't be betting your retirement savings on these dividends coming through. But it's good to see that the BCH ecosystem has been carrying on. Any thoughts on any of this, NoPara?
Not really.
Nothing. All right, let's crack on. We got one more quick little topic that I wanted to address just briefly here. There's been some rioting in the UK over the last couple of weeks, and I don't want to get into all of that. This is not the British discussion show. It's a multifaceted issue, and there's a lot going on there, and I have my own opinions, having been living in the UK for 5 years, but I'm also not British, and also this is not the place for a detailed discussion of all of it. But what I wanted to highlight just briefly is that a big part of the problem is that the inflation and rising cost of living is creating pressure on the local population, which is creating social unrest. And we're going to see that everywhere in the world as hyperinflation continues to ramp up. That's one of the big theses of this show, and we've covered it many times before. Here's just yet another example, and I think people should see that as being at least one of the factors at play. And then you also have an element of censorship with the government cracking down on memes and information being shared online, and some people say this is there's hate speech, or some people say it's freedom of speech. There's a whole spectrum of opinions there, but it's just very familiar to the Bitcoiner crowd to see that the world is getting more and more volatile as inflation ramps up and as censorship continues. Well, that's kind of what the Bitcoin philosophy is against, because that doesn't fix problems. It just creates more of them. It just ramps up the pressure on the pressure cooker. So I really wanted to just highlight that briefly. Any thoughts on any of this, NoPara?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I just thought I'd bring it up. I saw you maybe saying like the censorship was also a bit out of control on Twitter. You know, anyway, we'll see where that goes. But it's just, Jet, I don't know. You're looking like you got
Yeah,
something to say on this.
I saw one thing that I thought was hilarious. So the police minister put out a thing that was like, we're looking to extradite Americans who are breaking our hate
making
speech
memes.
laws. Yeah. And then they ended up having to block American IP addresses from their help service because they were just trolling them the entire time.
Everyone flooded them with memes. Yeah,
And I was like, do you not forget those? They left your monarchy over a 4% tax increase, and you're like, we're gonna extradite you? That's not gonna work. I would love to see them try. Like, as someone who is not in either country, I would love to see this go to its logical conclusion.
But it's just this classic, authoritarian instinct that people have. You know, you see these clips of the police chiefs being like, you're having rioting in your own country, right? So obviously you have your own problems to deal with. Let's not be worrying about what's going on in other countries. But yet their first instinct is like, we're going to police, whatever is happening somewhere else. It's like, fucking get your own country in order before you are pointing fingers at anyone else. It's just absolutely crazy. Anyway, that's a big topic, and I do anybody who's interested, I recommend you look into it and keep in mind that it is a topic that is very heavily charged, obviously, and also has a lot of media at play in it, both in censoring things or presenting certain angles. Everybody interested can make up their own mind or look into that. Okay. Message to the community. We have a little slot at the end of every show where the guest gets a bit of free talk segment where whatever point of view or lesson or interesting fact or anything they want to say that they think the BCH community needs to hear can get to them via this show. Obviously, lots of the BCH community listening to this show. NoPara, what does the BCH community need to hear?
Think before you post.
Brutal. Okay. All right. Do you want another bite at it on another topic, or that's it? Nope. That's it. Brilliant. Okay, I love it. Well played, sir. Well played. All right, supporter appreciation. Thank you to donators. Love you all. It's amazing. Some of that on-chain sats. Thank you to our patrons, Ricky and HP. Thank you to our sponsors, General Protocols. Check out bchbull.com. And our Flipstarter contributors, Majamali Marcelo. Go to 2024.bcharg.com and get tickets to the conference in October. Molecular, Erdogan Talk, Turek, Emergent Reasons, Big V and the Bitcoin Cash Tokyo Gang, Peter McCormack, Brian Kanachi, at Mini Satoshi, and beer. Start guide, FAQs, and links are at bitcoincashpodcast.com. If you're new, you can check out episode 85. Try Selene Wallet at selene.cash. Let's just quickly check in on how many active users we have today. I think it was something like 70 something last I checked. 74 people yesterday, and we've had 53 today with 6 hours to go, so not bad. We're looking at 250-ish users per week over the last few weeks, but the world's best cryptocurrency wallet going to be ramping up there over time. We'll keep an eye on that. NoPara, any final shout outs for the show, and where can people find more of you?
Oh yeah, if you want to stock sats for thousands of years, then check out my YouTube channel, NoPara73, where I'm interviewing the Rejuvenation Olympics athletes.
Yes, very, very cool. And also the link to your Twitter will be on the slides. Stack sats for thousands of years. That's a great tagline. Jet, any shout outs?
No, I really have. I've just been working for like a month. I haven't done it. Like, I'm so distant. No shout outs, sorry.
And my shout out goes to you, NoPara, for coming on the show. Of all the people that I tagged and talked about in that episode, you were the only one that was willing to engage with it a bit and discuss. And I'm really glad we've done this, because I think it's been super valuable for me, hopefully for you, and for the listeners and anybody who wants to tune in and check it out. And that's what this is all about, right? Just discovering the truth through conversation, and everyone has their own opinion. And the most important thing is that you can have a straight up discussion. So I've really enjoyed that, and I'll be keeping an eye on whatever you've got cooking. Maybe I'm going to have to start some rejuvenating. I was having my daily supplements. I saw you got the stack. You're like, your stack's getting bigger and bigger. I'm already having like several different nutritional pills per day. So we'll see. That's something I got to do a deeper dive on. All right, that'll do it for the show. Thank you everyone for listening. Until next time.